All right, so buckle up because we're diving into a topic that's like a UFO conspiracy theorist's dream come true. We're talking anti-gravity government secrets and a scientist who disappeared. I gotta say, this deep dive request really grabbed my attention.
Yeah, it's one of those stories that leaves you with more questions than answers, that's for sure.
Kidding. So we're digging into the rumors about this Chinese scientist maybe cracked anti-gravity back in the 90s. Her name's Dr. Ning Li. And let me tell you, the pieces of this puzzle are wild. We're talking published research papers, claims of functional anti-gravity devices.
To really get a handle on this, we got to talk about anti-gravity itself for a second. I mean, it's usually something you hear about in sci-fi movies, right?
Yeah.
But the idea has been bouncing around in physics for decades. Think about it.
Right.
What if we could just mess with gravity like we do with electricity?
Seriously. That would be absolutely insane. Like, our whole understanding of the universe would be flipped on its head.
Exactly. Transportation, space travel, everything would change overnight. I mean, forget flying cars for a second, although those would be awesome. Imagine trains zipping around faster than ever, using almost no energy, or just hopping into your own personal aircraft. We're talking about a total transformation.
Okay, I'm with you on the changing the world part.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that really gets me. Dr. Leia wasn't just thinking about this stuff. She was actually building it, or at least that's what she said. We're talking about actual anti-gravity devices.
Yeah, and she was publishing papers about them up until the late 90s. Now, whether those devices actually worked, that's a whole other can of worms. But the thing is, people were taking her seriously, and not just anyone.
You're talking about big names in physics, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Some heavy hitters.
And it wasn't just the science world either. Because in '99, Dr. Liu, she just up and leaves her university job, starts her own company called AC Gravity, and get this, they get funding from the U.S. Department of Defense.
That's right. And that little detail, that's huge. I mean, it tells you that someone in the U.S. government, someone who knows their way around cutting-edge tech, they saw something real in Dr. Li's research. They thought it was worth investing in. And that's not something you see every day. I mean, think about it. We're talking about potentially changing how we understand physics. The applications could be mind-blowing.
Right. Makes you wonder what they saw in her work and if it even worked at all. And here's where things get even weirder. After 2002, Dr. Li, she just vanishes.
Yeah, like off the grid. No more papers, no conference appearances. It's strange.
You mentioned earlier that some big names in physics were taking her work seriously, but did anybody try to, replicate her experiments?
That's the thing. There's no proof that anybody actually managed to replicate her work. Some scientists, they pointed out some holes in her theories, but others, they said her research was just way too ahead of its time, maybe even, deliberately buried.
Okay, so we've got the scientists on the edge of a massive breakthrough, potentially backed by the U.S. government, and then poof, gone. I'm starting to see why you requested this deep dive.
Yeah, and there are a few more details, like little breadcrumbs in the story. The sources, they mention her being at a conference in 2003, still linked to the DoD. But after that, nothing. Then in 2021, an obituary pops up online, but it barely mentions anything about her life or work after, the early 2000s.
Wow, so they kept her on the down low even after all those years. That's really strange.
Yeah, and that's where things get really interesting. I mean, historically, there have been tons of times when scientific discoveries were just completely hushed up, buried by governments, for national security and all that, like remember the atomic bomb. Developed in total secrecy during the war, and even after it was over, the information was super tightly controlled.
So are you saying Dr. Li might have stumbled onto something so big, so game-changing, that it had to be kept under wraps?
It's definitely a possibility. I mean, imagine if her anti-gravity research actually worked. Think about the military applications, aircraft that can move in ways we can't even imagine. Weapon systems that use gravity itself? That's a whole new ballgame.
That's both incredibly exciting and totally terrifying at the same time. But what about the Chinese government? I mean, she was originally from China, right? Could they have been involved in her disappearance?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a huge theory, especially with how things are between countries these days. If Dr. Li had really made a breakthrough, it makes sense that the Chinese government would want her back, with all their research and expertise.
Especially with anti-gravity tech having the potential to completely change the global balance of power. I mean, we're already in a tech race, but this would be on another level.
Exactly. And one of the sources I read actually quotes an expert who says flat out that the Chinese are most likely to develop this technology first. Now, that's a pretty bold statement, don't you think? To just come out and say publicly?
Yeah, it's like he's hinting at something. Like he knows more than he's letting on. This is like something out of a spy movie.
It really is. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Remember you were talking about UFOs. What if some of those unexplained sightings the ones that just don't make sense. They're actually this technology in action. Maybe super advanced drones using prototypes based on Dr. Li's research.
Whoa,
Yeah.
that is a wild thought. So you're saying there's a chance that one country already has this technology, and they could be using it for surveillance or even military operations, and nobody would even know. It's kind of mind-blowing to think that this tech might already be out there somewhere, even if it's top secret.
Right. It's like this weird mix of excitement and fear at the same time.
And speaking of fear, you mentioned the Tsar Bomba earlier. Feels like a bit of a jump from Dr. Liz and anti-gravity, but I'm guessing the sources bring it up for a reason.
Definitely. The Tsar Bomba, that hydrogen bomb the Soviets tested back in '61, it's like this stark reminder of just how much destruction we're capable of unleashing. I mean, it was way more powerful than anything used in World War II. The shockwaves literally went around the world.
Yeah, the sources mentioned that kind of power being used to create tsunamis. Imagine entire cities just wiped out. Like something out of a nightmare.
It's scary to think about. And the thing is, the tech to build those kinds of weapons, it's still around. And if this whole Dr. Li thing is true, if anti-gravity tech is being developed in secret, well, who's to say someone isn't working on weapons even more powerful than anything we've seen before?
That's a question I don't even want to think about. It's like we're hardwired to push the limits of science and tech, but we still haven't figured out how to keep ourselves in check, how to make sure it doesn't get used for the wrong reasons.
It's true. We're always caught between creation and destruction. And that's why these conversations are so important. It's not just about governments and armies. It's about all of us and how we shape the future of technology.
You're right. It's easy to get caught up in the mystery, the intrigue of it all, but we got to remember the bigger picture. What kind of future are we making?
Exactly. And you know what? There might be a clue right in front of us. The sources talk about the mushroom cloud from the Tsar Bomba, how it looked just like an actual mushroom.
That's kind of a powerful image. The ultimate symbol of destruction looking exactly like something that grows and connects things.
Right. It's like a message from the universe or something.
Okay, I'm going to go out on a limb here. Maybe the way to keep tech from destroying us is to embrace that other side. The spiritual, the interconnectedness, the things that remind us we're all human.
That's a really interesting thought. And you know what? It might not be so far-fetched. There are actually a lot of scientists out there who are starting to explore the connection between science and spirituality, trying to find answers to some of life's biggest questions.
So for our listeners out there, the ones who are fascinated by the unknown, maybe the question isn't just, is anti-gravity real? Or did Dr. Li actually figure it out? Maybe the real question is, can we handle it? Can we unlock these secrets without destroying ourselves? That feels like a deep dive all on its own.
I think that's a great place to leave it. It's something we all need to think about. Because the answer to that question is going to shape the future for all of us.